Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today, we've got two new cards to talk about, a new Produce SSR for Koito, and Support SSR for Amana. Keep in mind, these cards are limited, technically. Twilight's Collection comes around whenever a new Twilight's Collection banner is available, but the pull rate for characters after their initial debut is a lot lower. So if you want the opportunity to spark either Koito or Amana, or have a decent chance of pulling them before the spark, now is really your only chance to do so. Starting things off, we have Koito. Our first Twicolate of 2024 is Koito, who acts as a new pillar for Visual Nocchill, a team that had a pretty heavy push a long while back. She has the usual Twicolate appeal build, with 2 single target appeals, and finally an AoE appeal when maxed out. Each of these appeals raises your evasion by either 20%, 25%, or 30% depending on which appeal is used. Notably, she is the first Produce SSR to have a guaranteed duet on each of her appeals for a different member of Nocchill to create very flexible play. I really don't think that Nocchill, of all units, needed a Swiss Army Knife duet card that solves nearly every possible opening hand of appeals, especially for being a 4-member unit that already had smaller link appeals on most of their cards. Her non-AoE appeals can also grant the original Nocchill mechanic of evading attacks to raise your visual, but you'll likely only run maybe one of these if you max her out, since you'll be using the AoE appeal as your secondary. She's a huge step above a lot of recent cards, it feels, and I think that she is maybe one of the stronger Twicolate cards we've seen in a minute. Her roles are Center, Buffer, Evasion, Attack All, and Duet, and I highly recommend pulling for this Koito, whether you are trying to build Visual Nocchill from scratch, or are trying to improve upon a Visual Nocchill you already have. Koito's initial appeal is a visual 3.5 that raises your evasion by 20% for 4 turns, and duets guaranteed with Madoka, assuming that she's on your team. The link appeal is a visual 100% buff for 3 turns for every successful evasion, 3 times, up to 3 turns. So that means that each turn you can raise your visual by 100%, and each 100% buff lasts for 3 turns. Her 1-star appeal is a visual 5.0 that raises your evasion by 25% for 4 turns, and duets guaranteed with Toru. The plus appeal, which requires 2 or more active evasion up buffs, is a visual 100% buff for 3 turns per successful evasion, 3 turns up to 3 times, the same as the link appeal on her initial skill. Finally, her 4-star appeal is a visual 1.1 to 5.5 appeal to all judges that scales based on how high your evasion is. It raises your evasion by 30% for 4 turns, and duets guaranteed with Hinata. The link appeal is a visual 1.0 appeal. For her passives, Koito's 1-star passive is a visual 50% up and evasion 20% up that requires the turn count to be 2 or earlier. It has a 30% chance to activate once, and adds a visual plus 150 uncap. Her 2-star passive is a visual 120% up and attention 50% up that requires 1 or more active reaction up buffs. This has a 20% chance to activate twice, and unlocks a vocal dance visual plus 100 uncap. Her 3-star passive is a visual 160% up and attention 50% up that requires 2 or more active reaction up buffs, and has a 30% chance to activate twice. This grants a mental plus 200 uncap. Finally, the 4-star passive, which we'll talk about in a moment, also grants a vocal dance visual plus 100 uncap, and the memory appeal when maxed out is a visual 3.2 appeal that links into a visual maximum 3.5 appeal, scaling based on how high your evasion is. Said Rainbow passive is a visual 200% up that requires the full Nocchill lineup and for it to be turn 4 or later. It has a 30% chance to activate twice and is limited to once per turn. And she has the Twicolate passive that raises your memory gauge gain by 5% to all members, and their appeal strength by 3% for every instance of this passive. Still in this wave of Twicolate Produce SSRs, Koito has the memory gauge and appeal strength combo passive as a bonus to grant to other idols. Remember that when producing know-how books in any Produce mode, this ability can be inherited and taught to non-Twicolate Produce cards, and this one is arguably the better of the two to be using for now. Even if you do not intend on necessarily using Koito as a playable card for your teams, just having this as an option for your Produce runs in step to pass on this ability can be worthwhile. Her Rainbow passive is generally very strong and should be very easily accessible. Enough said there. Now, Twilight's Collection has not gotten any less expensive, so it's fair to consider that many may only have this Koito at 0 or 1 star. 1-star Koito is actually a fairly good trade-off. You have access to an okay passive, and you have both appeals that let you enact your faster and flexible Nocchill game plan. 2-star gives you your second strongest passive and allows other members of Nocchill to help fuel damage by building up evasion stacks. You can't really go wrong with how many copies you get to pivot either as the center or the visual position idol for your lineup. Plan carefully and spend wisely for your situation. For the support recommendations, the MVP is Twicolor Kaho, with a second place being Cool Joker Mamimi, the other Twicolor support. Visual good stuff has become more or less visual Hokuda, though the option to pivot to cards like Twicolor Mamimi or the pair of Shi's visual supports is reasonable to consider. Many of their effects play off of each other fairly well, making it completely understandable as to why this setup has been working so well for the last few months. Adjust as you feel you can. If you have maybe one or two of the visual Hokuda cards, that can be good enough just there. But always be on the lookout for any new visual cards to improve upon your lineup, especially if it synergizes with a play you want to make. For the grades, Koito earns an A+ to SS as a center. Koito having access to a 6.7 visual memory appeal when fully built up is kind of insane, despite it being a fairly tough amount to deal with. Really, the trickiest part is to get the max reaction required to pump up the memory appeal. There wasn't a particularly huge incentive to stack high-value evasion rather than just cycling through them. With this, you can have a very high-value memory appeal if you can commit to that specific playstyle. As a unit, easy SS. I think that Koito is very strong for a lot of kind of frustrating reasons. Her ability to pivot towards any sort of appeal rotation regardless of any situation is hard to understate, while packing strong Twicolor passives as per usual. She elevates her team to a new level of consistency that 5-member teams would kill to have. She has no real glaring weaknesses compared to other Twicolor, and is realistically all gas and no brakes for many Nocchill teams. Next then, we have Amana. Next on our Twicolor support lineup is Amana, as a new visual option for teams. She's aggressively focused on being an Alstroemeria support, as much of the biggest parts of her kit require a decent amount of healing to make it happen. Notably though, Amana does not have any healing through her passives, just her appeals. Her 4-star appeal is pretty strong, having upwards of 5 stacks of healing instances for Alstroemeria, and comes with Interest Ignore, a still fairly relevant effect. She's not a catch-all for visual teams, but is going to be very good for Alstroemeria going forward. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Rest Boost, and Stamina Support, and comes with 5 unique support skills. Unit Mastery SP reaching plus 14 at level 75, Visual Mastery Mental reaching plus 14 at level 80, Visual Mastery Visual Limit Up reaching plus 5 at level 75, Visual Mastery Stamina reaching plus 5 at level 70, and Perfect Mastery reaching plus 5 at level 80. Her support appeal does scale, starting at a Visual 3.0 out of the box, becoming a 3.1 with a Visual 5% buff for 3 turns at level 60, upgrading all the way to a Visual 3.5 appeal with a 25% visual buff for 3 turns at level 80. Her TFD idea is Mental, her Insight token for Grad is Visual, and her proficiencies and landing point are in Mental and SP. Amana's 0-star passive is a visual 60% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or earlier. It has a 20% chance to activate twice, and comes with a visual plus 50 uncap. Her 1-star appeal is a visual 3.5 that ignores the judge's interest and grants a mental 1% regen for 3 turns, and also grants a visual plus 50 uncap. Her 2-star passive is a visual 130% up that requires the number of healing instances during the run to be 5 or more. It has a 20% chance to activate twice, and has a visual plus 50 uncap. Her 3-star appeal is a visual 5.0 that ignores the judge's interest, applies an instant mental 5% heal, and a mental 1% regen for the next 4 turns. This also comes with a visual mental plus 75 uncap. Her rainbow passive is a visual 200% up that requires the full Alstroemeria lineup, and the number of healing instances during the run to be 8 or more. It has a 20% chance to activate once and is limited to once per turn. This also comes with a visual mental plus 75 uncap. Amana earns a B to a SS. Again, the usual Twilight's Collection issue. The trickiest part about Amana is the fact that her masteries do not favor having low copies, as much of what she offers really only starts working once she's 1 star at minimum. Most visual teams will find this card kinda hard to use, purely because they can't follow their own game plan while coincidentally healing a lot to benefit from the later passives without taking either of the Amana appeals. She'll for sure be a staple in visual Alstroemeria builds, but it'll be a harder sell outside of this. That's kind of why the B is even here in the first place. If you're looking at her from the perspective of, I play any visual team and would like a visual support, this card doesn't necessarily do everything for you, unless you're playing Alstro. I feel like this is okay, though, to prevent the game from devolving into TC or die any faster than it might already be, depending on the team you build. So, that will do it for the video today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next, so let's look forward to it together. Till then, I've been Cho, thank you for watching, have a wonderful rest of your day.